This is an important video. I am in grave danger. I am making a record of exactly what happened before they find me. I am a whistleblower who worked as a power supply engineer for two of the major companies that claim to manufacture satellites. I have to hide the identity of my voice for protection, but I am real. For 15 years, I was convinced that I actually designed electronics packages, what we call black boxes that are on board satellites. I designed the Mark 271 power converter to convert the solar panel power and regulate it so that it can be used to power the electronics packages aboard the GPS Phase 5 satellites. I also was told I was designing power converters for the Motorola Iridium Class 9A satellites. Then in 2006 I worked for a company in Las Vegas, designing the electronics for the upgraded military smart bombs called JDAM that are guided by GPS. You can Google that if you want to know more. I began to suspect there was something fishy about every company I worked for when on September 17 of 2007 I was pulled aside by an engineer that worked for the Air Force and was the engineering supervisor for the contract. He offered to take me to the Trump casino that weekend and we could have a few drinks and said we needed to talk privately about the contract. I was in charge of prototyping the electronics and guidance system at the time. I wasn't married and I had the entire weekend free, so I said, why not? I didn't even put it together that he had paid rooms at the Trump casino. Why that particular casino? At least not until Trump ran for president this year. I knew that he actually knew Trump and sometimes played golf with him. I agreed to talk. We met at 8 p.m. at the bar and he began to explain to me that now that most of the work was done that it was time to fix the bomb quietly and put the GPS satellite antennas on the front of the bomb. I asked him what he was talking about. The GPS antenna is on the rear of the bomb where the fins are so they will face the sky and pick up the satellites. I thought he had gone crazy. Putting the GPS antenna on the front would have them face down and the metal of the bomb would block the signal from the satellites. I asked, what ground signal are you talking about? I was shocked as he explained that there were no GPS satellites. That all the signals came from cell towers on the ground. I thought he was joking with me, but to make a long story short, he insisted that it was true and the original design was because there were so many people that were involved. We had to build it this way to keep the military secret that we don't really have satellites in space. We argued over this for over an hour while I was getting sicker and sicker at the stories I was hearing of deception to the public. I was hoping that I would go home, sleep off the drinks and it would go away, but it didn't. That's not what they taught us in school. The Earth is round and satellites spin around it and that included the GPS. Why did they let us get so far into the contract before we were told? I would later find out that everything we did was to hide the military secrets. They know all engineers are told that GPS is from comparing the timing of spread spectrum pseudo-random and encrypted code streams from satellites to calculate a position. I had to go back and I was allowed only one engineer who had worked for us longer than I have, to change the antennas. We had to leave the little white plastic antenna on the back behind the fins so that the soldiers would think it was real. We were ordered to hide the GPS ground antennas in the nose of the bomb where the fusing mechanism resides and it was to be sealed in that unit with the primary explosive so it couldn't be opened. He told me of other things, that I intend to expose to the world at a later time. I must say that I was frustrated and the drinks he bought me didn't help, but it all made sense since I knew that our last field tests at the JDAM test site in Los Angeles had failed. I knew they had failed, but I thought that our antennas didn't have enough gain to pick up the very weak signals from the satellites. I didn't even use my brain and realize that even a cheap cell phone from Apple can pick up the signal. It had to be from cell towers, not space. He went on to explain that the white plastic satellite antenna on the tail would remain to fool those building the bombs, if they were smart enough to know anything about GPS. The new antennas on the nose would be built into the fuse where the primary initiating explosive is so that it wouldn't be taken apart or discovered. I am very upset about what happened next, but to make an honest account of what happened, I must tell the rest of the story. I continued to talk with the blonde-haired, blue-eyed engineer from the government that I had trusted. He was getting me drunk, but I was not complaining. He kept talking about the all-seeing eye and even asked me if I had considered joining the Freemasons and socializing with he and others like Trump. I told him I wasn't into that sort of club because they were just old men. My head began to spin and I didn't know what to say because I thought we were talking about designing GPS modules. He then slapped a $1 bill down on the table and pointed to that pyramid with a floating eye above it that I didn't understand and said, "See, that is the ever-seeing eye. You had better learn who you work for," and he laughed. All of a sudden the smile was gone and he leaned forward and looked into my eyes and said, "You have the highest compartmentalized clearance on this project, and if one word of what we talked about gets to anybody, you will be tried for treason and that carries the death penalty." Then he whispered something that caused chills to run up my spine. "That is if you live long enough to go to jail. Accidents do happen, you know." My head was spinning, I didn't know what was real. I guess he saw my concern and he said, "You will soon understand." He got up and left. Before I could empty my last drink, two of the most gorgeous girls appeared at my table. Both were at least 10 years younger than me. I should have gone home, but I was young, single and drunk. It really causes me pain to tell this story and be honest about what happened because I was so weak. To make a long story short, the girl with short straight black hair and the curly redhead claimed they had a room on the 6th floor, and like an idiot I boarded the elevator with them. I am ashamed to say that they took advantage of me all night, and at 6 in the morning, when I began to sober up, the girl with the straight black hair said, "You know the truth. As long as you play the game we will be back. But, if you tell anyone about what you have learned last night, you won't live long enough to regret it. People, know the truth. The government is lying to you, and so is the Illuminati who is behind all of this. Pay attention, people, I worked for the government. You should also know that the code name for GPS in the military is 666. And I'm sure it is not a coincidence. But the billions appropriated for an expensive program like GPS goes a long way in perpetuating the biggest hoax ever pulled on the entire world by those in power. That was a long time ago to me, and I've lived the lie ever since with every project I've worked on, including going through all the trouble to build power supplies for satellites that don't even exist. I don't know if the Earth is flat, square, or shaped like a banana. What I do know is that finding out GPS doesn't come from satellites, and that there are really no satellites, and exposing that could get me killed. After living this lie for many years and having to tell our contractors the lie to keep the engineers in the dark, I had all I could take. Last week I got into a fight with my boss, Drake, when I could take it no longer. He kept telling me that it was okay and things would be alright and not to worry about it. He said he agreed with me that it was time to go public, and he said we should talk to the company vice president first, who was a friend of ours. He made me promise not to talk to anybody until we could fill him in the next day. When I turned on my block, I saw a car backing out of my driveway. It had two men in it wearing sunglasses. They were going really fast. I thought they were just using my driveway to turn around. When I got to the house, I unlocked the front door and went inside and was going to turn my alarm system off. I used a professional alarm system because I often have classified drawings and documents in my house. When I entered the hidden closet where it is located, I found that it was already turned off. I immediately knew something was wrong because it arms automatically at 9 o'clock each morning if I forget to arm it. It will not go off until I insert a card with a microchip in it. It is also battery powered and can run for a week without power. I immediately knew something was wrong. The first thing I did was call security at the plant because we have to notify them first when there is a break-in, even at our house, because of the confidential government material. I talked to a man named Larry who is the nighttime security manager. He told me that under no circumstances should I call the police, and they would be out in less than 20 minutes depending on the traffic. These are not nighttime watchmen. They are security contractors from a company that was deployed in Afghanistan, and they were authorized by the government to protect their secrets at our company. Larry told me to stay in the house and lock the doors and don't talk to anybody until they arrived. After about 5 minutes I started getting paranoid that something was wrong. At least I thought I was paranoid. My neighbor is a contract agent that works for NASA who protects 2 of the astronaut pretenders that live in our town. We had told each other a lot of things that we probably shouldn't, but I've known him for 20 years and we even drank together on Saturday nights. I went over to his house and quickly told him what was going on and that I thought maybe I said too much at work. Being a special agent for the government, he said he would come over to my house and look around. To make a long story short, he found 4 pounds of C4 explosive hidden in the back of my bedroom closet that was on the wall next to my den. He grabbed my arm and literally dragged me out of the house. We ran to his garage and loaded up in his car and took off. He told me he was going to make a call, but not to worry. It was hard to trust him because I knew he was government too. He carries a special encrypted cell phone that cannot be tracked. It didn't take him long to find out from his boss that I had been marked by the government and was considered a threat higher than any terrorist. The government can't have their cover blown on this. Suffice it to say that he did not blow my cover and he gave me a bundle of unmarked cash that agents carry for other reasons. He took me to a location that I cannot disclose. Since then I have moved 3 times, each time just barely staying ahead of the government. I want this story to be public in case something happens to me. I am guessing that if I can't get to another country that I'm a dead man. When the space cover-up is threatened, all stops are pulled to prevent it from leaking since it is the biggest lie the government has. I do not know the owner of this YouTube channel other than he is certain these conspiracies are true. The government hides everything. He has agreed to post my videos when I send them to him on secure channels. I tried to contact some of the newspapers that have broken the WikiLeaks stories, but they claim they can't touch it. The Illuminati has gotten to them. I am contacting a reporter for WikiLeaks tomorrow. There are things I can expose that are in plain sight. I will keep sending my YouTube friend updates and videos of my progress. If I disappear you will understand, but I'm going to give it my best shot. This is my second video after almost getting killed for whistleblowing. You can watch my first video for more information about my situation. A lot has happened since the last video was made. I finally made it to a place which should be safe for a while. I am staying in a nice cabin with snow-covered mountains and a bright warm fire in the fireplace. There are certain theories put forth by the flat earth community to explain certain things. Some are close, but many miss the mark in explaining how the global earth delusion is made. Over the next few weeks, I want to provide some of the inside evidence before something happens to me. This week, I want to go into a very non-technical discussion of satellites, what they are, and how they work in a flat earth model. Before I start, I want you to know that I have been in contact with both WikiLeaks and the Guardian newspaper concerning the release of absolute proof that I have managed to obtain. Both have expressed their great concern about leaking this information. Their experts are looking into the risk involved. I hope things work out, but we must remain aware that there are people on the inside of every industry that will do what they can to stop exposure of their world. This information is very dangerous for me because a lot of people will be exposed. One thing to consider is the economic impact that exposure to all of the deception will cause. I have considered this, and the exposure of the lies is more important than the short-term effects. As I said, I want to begin a discussion on satellites today. There are all sorts of explanations about satellites, which has been a thorn in the side of the flat earth community. Some people might suggest they are actually balloons similar to weather balloons, or aircraft, while some say they even exist and float around above the earth. Still others claim they do not exist at all and we really get all of our satellite signals from the ground. This is another one of those illusions that is in plain sight, and I am a bit surprised at the flat earth community because they are very good at discerning the truth, but this one, I don't believe anybody has quite figured out. Satellite uplink and downlink dishes are real. The uplink beams a signal toward the sky, and the downlink receives a signal, and that signal actually comes from the sky and not the ground. Any electronic technician can tell you why a dish would have to pick up a signal from the sky, due to the way they are made, and they have to be aligned to an exact location in the sky. So, if there are no satellites, where does the signal come from? A balloon? Everybody by now should know that balloons are pushed by the winds. Satellite antennas that are used for geostationary satellites do not move. Can you imagine what a nightmare it would be to make the illusion of satellites by putting up balloon after balloon to keep at least one in front of all of the satellite dishes? Since there are supposedly a lot of satellites in geostationary orbit, the nightmare would be even worse. Another problem is that balloons big enough to carry a transponder would be like large weather balloons, which can often be seen from the ground, especially when the sun is at a low angle in the sky and lights it up. All of these balloons would be seen by someone, and they would also have to come down somewhere. No, satellites are not balloons. Nor are they aircraft. Satellites are also not floating around over the flat plane. It is really quite simple. Engineers have been able to take advantage of some very unique properties of the dome which covers the Earth. If any of you watch science fiction shows like Star Trek, there are hints into all of these things that are hidden, just like in many movies. Star Trek actually uses theoretical science to come up with its explanations and far-out technology. In one of the early Star Trek movies, when they went back to the 20th century to get an endangered whale, they needed some material to make a whale tank in the Enterprise. They visited a supplier of transparent materials, but could not find any that was strong enough. Scotty sat down at the computer and gave the man a molecular matrix that he called transparent aluminum. Transparent aluminum only exists in theory, but it is said to have unique properties. One of those properties was changing the incident angle of an electromagnetic wave from a normal reflected signal. Without getting technical, I will try to describe what I mean. When you shine a light on a window or shiny surface, the light reflects at the same angle that it arrives. In other words, a mirror placed at a 45-degree angle will bounce light in a manner that it will turn a 90-degree corner. Back during the late 50s and early 60s, scientists were probing the dome with stronger and shorter wavelength radio signals. When their technology improved, they found a strange phenomenon. When a radio signal hit the dome, it did not reflect off at the same incidence angle. The radio signal somehow excited the molecules in the dome in such a way that it appeared to retransmit the signal back at the same angle of the radio wave from the ground. This was a revolution for two different groups of people, and those at the top had a brainstorm. They had just discovered a way to simulate satellites to keep their illusion going in the face of better technology, plus, this could actually be used to communicate very wide-band signals over far areas across the Earth. In order to understand why this is important, you have to know a bit about radio and communications. Radio signals are based on frequency, or cycles per second, which is called hertz. Radio signals on low frequencies such as AM broadcast can bounce through the ionosphere, but this is not reliable and changes during the time of day. Another big problem is that the lower the frequency, the less bandwidth it can carry. Digital video signals require a lot more bandwidth. The higher the frequency that is used for communication, the more bandwidth you can use. But, when you get up to microwave signals, which are billions of cycles per second, the signal will only go in a straight line and will not bounce off of the upper atmosphere. Let's go back and look at the dome. Because of the unique properties of what we engineers call coherent reflection, satellite dishes can uplink a signal to the dome and it will reflect back down along the same path. But a secondary signal also bounces off at the same incident angle. This allows bouncing it so that it can be picked up not only locally, but in other countries. But, there was a huge problem. Although radio signals were bouncing off of the dome, they were very weak due to the distances involved. I will provide you the exact dimensions of the dome in a later video. It is well understood and has been probed and measured. Another characteristic that was shown in the transparent aluminum model was related to its electrical charge and its excitability to enhance radio signals that it reflects by resonant molecular motion. If only a way to add a small electrical charge to the dome could be figured out, but this was obviously beyond their capabilities. At least until hydrogen bomb tests in the 50s proved that strong electromagnetic signals called EMP pulses are created with bursts at high altitudes. Secret discussions between the United States and the Soviet Union were held after the scientists determined that with a specified number of upper atmospheric air bursts were planned. To this day, I do not know the exact number. The Soviets and Americans set off several at different locations to make this work. These started in 1958 and the first commercial use of a fake satellite by private industry occurred when Echo 1 was supposedly launched in 1960. After the final charging bursts were fired in 1963, the second fake Echo was launched, while an uplink-downlink were provided for international live television signals between Europe and the United States. The atomic tests worked exactly as the engineers predicted, but there is a problem that has started. Although the charge lasts for years, even decades, it is beginning to drop. The physics of the way the charge works is not linear, so as it drops the reflected signals do not drop, until this charge gets below a certain level. Since atomic tests have been supposedly banned, scientists had to come up with another reason to set off a few atomic booster bursts to keep the charge above this threshold. They had to figure out another way to explain to people why they were setting off atomic bombs in the sky. Along came a new idea: what if the Earth was threatened by something, and what better thing than an asteroid? Of course, both Russia and the United States could design and implement nuclear-tipped rockets to either destroy and nudge a large asteroid over. All of a sudden there are asteroids passing between us and the moon, making near misses. This is a planned programming of the population, so that when the time comes to set off a few more atomic bombs that can be seen from the ground, there will be no question what they are used for. Just like the global illusion. We have come a long way since the first television broadcast that supposedly used the Echo satellite, which was a large inflatable balloon covered with mylar and flashed aluminum. Once they discovered the dome could be used for radio communications, there was a need for more channels and thus more satellites. This is where a big problem for engineers occurred. When the signal hit the dome and reflected, it spread out and it was impossible to reflect different signals within a few degrees of each other off of the dome. Engineers who had developed radars for the Navy and military had used a system called phased array antennas at microwave frequencies to scan very narrow beam radar signals up and down. I do not want to go into detail on this video because it requires a lot of math. If there are those of you who have technical questions about this, please comment and I will provide you with more information. Suffice it to say that by using phased array antenna techniques they were able to send signals into the adjacent spots that are 180 degrees out of phase, which cancel the spreading effect. This allows the engineers to put more of the imaginary satellites up and also provide industry with a lot of bandwidth and communications. So satellites are fake, but then again, they are not. The dome, with its unique characteristics, allows this illusion to exist, and also the billion-dollar satellite communications industry. In the next week, I will go into GPS and exactly how it works with the accuracy that it does. I will also go into some very top-secret uses of the dome to actually spy on other countries and thus creating the illusion of military spy satellites. Finally, I will cover microwave links on the Earth and explain why they actually do use Earth curvature when they design a path, but why this is an illusion that was built in to fool the average electronic engineer. I welcome questions, and if I don't know the answer, will try to contact someone who does. In the meantime, I hope that I can get the information I hold published soon so that we can expose this and I can return to public life. Wish me luck.